Hey everybody, Professor Gould here. We're going to start learning about articulations, which are just any place where two bones come in contact with each other. The things that we think of as joints, obviously those are articulations, but also all of the sutures in the skull, even though they don't move, those are still articulations. So we can call them joints. The technical term is articulation. The study of those is arthrology, because arthro means joint. Now the trade-off in joints, there's always a trade-off between stability and mobility. The sutures in the skull, very, very stable, which is great for protecting your brain, but not so good for moving around, which is fine around your brain. You don't need to move there. But for something like your shoulder, you want to be able to move it. It is very advantageous from an evolutionary point of view to be able to have lots of movement in our shoulders. But the trade-off is that there is less stability in a joint that has more mobility. So it's a constant trade-off. Now we're going to talk about two different classifications for joints. We have structural and functional classifications. Structural is how the bones are fit together. Fibrous joints, the bones are held together by dense regular connective tissue. Cartilaginous joints, the bones are held together by a pad of cartilage. And then synovial joints are the ones that you think of as joints. So all of the joints in your hands and your wrists, your elbows, all of those are synovial joints. Synovial joints are going to have a cavity around the bones that's filled with fluid, and that fluid is going to help to cushion the bones against each other and to help movement between the bones. And then the bones are also going to be covered in articular cartilage. That doesn't make them cartilaginous. Cartilaginous, pad of cartilage. Hang on, I've got examples. Okay, functionally, we're going to classify joints by how much they move. If they don't move, they're called a synarthrosis. Synarthroses is plural. So the sutures in the skull, synarthroses. Amphiarthroses are slightly mobile, and this is a little confusing because the third classification is diarthrosis, which is freely mobile. But some of the synovial joints, which are all classified as diarthroses, some of them don't move that much. Like the plane joints in the wrist, they don't have a ton of movement in them. They're still considered diarthroses because all synovial joints are diarthroses. All right, so the types of fibrous joints, the sutures are the most obvious ones. With these distinct interlocking edges, where obviously the skull can grow through childhood. These do become ossified in adulthood and fuse up. And when they are completely fused, they are called synostoses. That means the two bones have completely fused together and there's no connective tissue in there anymore. Syndesmosis is a type of a fibrous joint. Okay, so a suture is a type of a fibrous joint. A syndesmosis is a type of a fibrous joint. It is, however, an amphiarthrosis. Okay, so it's structurally fibrous, functionally slightly mobile. So the inner osseous membrane between the radius and ulna and between the tibia and the fibula, these are considered syndesmoses. Syn meaning with, desmos meaning a band or a ligament. So literally they're held together with ligament syndesmosis because we knew that desmos meant ligament. Whatever, okay. Like I said, these are dense regular connective tissue bands. They do have some movement in it so that we can rotate those joints. Now, cartilaginous joints. Okay, move myself over here. A synchondrosis, syn with and chondrocartilage means two things held together with a band of cartilage. So all of the epiphyseal plates in all of your long bones are actually considered synchondroses. These are functionally synarthroses because they don't move. Okay? Now, between the ribs and the costal cartilage, those costochondral joints, those are synchondroses. And The joints between ribs number 1 and 2 and the sternum, those are also synchondroses. So it's just the cartilage to the bone directly. Okay? Synarthroses, very little movement in those. Now these other joints for the lower costal cartilage and the sternum, those are actually a different kind of joint. I know. Now a symphysis, you've heard of the pubic symphysis. That's this pad of cartilage between the two pubic bones. This is another kind of cartilaginous joint. Okay, so we've got synchondrosis, which is where we have the cartilage pretty well integrated with the bone. And then we have the symphysis, where we have a distinct pad of cartilage between the two bones. And here we have the pubic symphysis, a fibrocartilage pad, and also the intervertebral discs. These are also considered symphyses. These are all amphiarthroses, meaning that there is a little bit of movement. Yes, there's a tiny bit of movement in the pubic symphysis, which just, really, how much movement can you get out of that? It seems like this, which is also an amphiarthrosis, gets a lot more movement. But okay, now note, these are symphyses. They are amphiarthroses, these intervertebral discs joining the vertebrae. These connections over here, these articulations, those are synovial joints. Okay, so you have different things going on next to each other. All right, now let's talk synovial joints. So synovial joints, like I said, most of the joints in your body that you think about, these are synovial joints. The basic features are there's a fibrous articular capsule that surrounds the bones and the joint space. And that articular capsule has a fibrous layer, and then the inner layer is a cellular layer called the synovial membrane. And the synovial membrane is made up of epithelial cells that make synovial fluid. Are you getting this recurring idea that we've got cells all over the body that like filter blood plasma and make fluid, which is kind of blood plasma, but once it's in a different place, we call it something else? Synovial fluid. So synovial fluid is this fluid that fills the articular cavity or the joint cavity and provides more cushioning between the bones or between the articular cartilage, and helps the joint move more freely. Also provides cushioning for stress. Now, one of the cool things is, remember that articular cartilage is acellular and avascular. Sorry, not acellular, avascular. Can't talk to me. Meaning that this cartilage doesn't have blood vessels running through it. And so any nutrients that get to that cartilage to heal it have to get there by diffusion. Well, the synovial fluid has all of the stuff that's in the blood plasma. Oxygen, can carry away carbon dioxide, it's got nutrients, it's got all that stuff. When you compress joints, you essentially push that synovial fluid into that cartilage, which is why doctors often talk about the need to move joints that are healing. Once the bones themselves have knit themselves back together, in order to heal the joint more quickly, you need to move it so that you can push some of that synovial fluid into the cartilage and the fibers as well, and speed that healing. Kind of cool, right? All right, so we've got the fibrous layer and the synovial membrane. Those both make up the articular capsule, and this is around the whole joint and outside of the articular cartilage. Okay, remember the articular cartilage is hyaline cartilage, and it's going to cover all the articulating surfaces. Okay, nice smooth layer. A synovial joint is also held together by ligaments. Ligaments hold bones together. And those ligaments could be inside the articular capsule or outside or both, depending on the joint. We'll come back to that later. There are also lots and lots of nerves and blood vessels running through here, running through the capsule, around these parts to provide blood flow and information to these structures. All synovial joints are classified functionally as diarthroses, even though some of them don't move very much. So if you think about the articulations between the vertebrae, the superior and inferior articular facets, they can move, they're plane joints, yes, they can move across each other in several different ways, but they don't move, to be honest, but they are considered diarthroses because they are synovial joints and they do have more movement in them than the amphiarthroses. So the cartilaginous joints, the symphyses in your vertebral column, those intervertebral discs, they're not going to move very much, okay? The bones can do a little bit of this, yeah? Can't do a lot of this. That movement comes from the facets, the inferior and articular facets from the vertebrae. All right, now, the sternocostal joints, meaning the joints between the sternum and the costal cartilage of ribs 2 through 7, so from here down, these are all diarthroses, and these are actually plane joints. So these can move against each other. And that's what happens as you breathe. Your rib cage actually expands, and these joints actually flex against the sternum. Cool, right? Now, if you need a reminder, the difference between ligaments and tendons. Ligaments and tendons are all made of dense, regular connective tissue. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Tendons connect muscle to bone, okay? The only way I can remember this, and I honestly have to think about this every time I say it, the things in your knee, these are all ligaments, okay? ACL, PCL, anterior cruciate ligament, posterior cruciate ligament. The L is for ligament. We also have collateral ligaments. We'll come back to those in a minute. The Achilles tendon that attaches to your heel, also called the calcaneal tendon, connects your calf muscles, your gastrocnemius and soleus muscles to the calcaneus bone. So that is a tendon. So Achilles tendon, ACL ligament. So tendon, muscle to bone, ligament, bone to bone. Then we have in synovial joints sometimes other pockets of fluid. So we have the synovial cavity within the joint, between the articular cartilage of the two bones. Sometimes we need some extra padding, extra cushioning, and to help, some more help easing friction, especially around some of our more complicated joints. And so we have these little other sacs filled with fluid called bursa. These are lined with synovial membrane. They are filled with synovial fluid, which is, again, blood plasma. And some of these are within the articular capsule. Some of them are inside it, some of them are outside. Again, this is really, really complicated. But those are called bursae. You have a bunch of bursae in your shoulder, you have some in your knee, you got them in your elbow. You also have special bursae around tendons for the feet and hands. And these things are called tendon sheaths. So you have this long, thin sort of balloon of fluid that goes around the tendon and eases the friction of that tendon moving between the bones and between the muscles in the hand as well. So this is a pocket wrapped around a tendon that's called a tendon sheath, and it is a kind of a bursa. So in the hand, you have this one tendon sheath that goes around all of these tendons that are going to go into the hand. And then you have individual tendon sheaths going around the tendons to each finger, okay? All right, so we have 3 types of joints. We have fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. And then we have 3 functional categories. Synarthrosis, not moving. Diarthrosis, a little bit of movement. Or sorry, amphiarthrosis, a little bit of movement. Diarthrosis, free movement. And then we have, within the synovial joint, we have an articular capsule made of a fibrous outer layer, a cellular inner layer that creates synovial fluid, That's called the synovial membrane that makes the synovial fluid. The bone surfaces are covered with articular cartilage. The bones are held together by ligaments, and there may or may not be bursae around or within the synovial joint as well. All right, next up, we're going to talk types of motion that your joints can do.